On June 30th, 1908, close to the Tunguska River in Siberia, there was a massive explosion. In fact, it's been called the biggest explosion in history. If you were standing next to it, you would have been vaporized instantly. But this wasn't a nuclear bomb. This was something else entirely. And what exactly caused it is still a mystery today. There are a few pieces of evidence that make scientists think that this explosion was caused by a meteor. First of all, it happened in a very remote area. No people lived anywhere near it. Well, not actually, because scientists have spent decades searching for the impact crater, and they haven't found one. And so scientists have come up with other hypotheses. Maybe it was a UFO. Maybe it was a secret military experiment gone wrong. Or maybe it was a gigantic fart. For example, some scientists think that what we call the Tunguska Event was actually two separate events. Maybe a large rock entered the atmosphere and exploded on impact with the air, but then a few days later a smaller rock hit the ground and caused the explosion. Researchers have found small amounts of iridium in sediment layers from both before and after the event. And since asteroids contain lots of iridium, they think this could be evidence that a smaller asteroid hit the ground a few days after the initial explosion. The energy released was about 12 megatons of TNT. That's about 30 times the energy of the Hiroshima atomic bomb, and over 10 times the energy of the largest nuclear weapon ever detonated. When it hit the atmosphere, the friction would have melted the ice, and superheated steam created the explosion. We hope you learned something here. So why not share this video with your friends and family? Thanks for watching. See ya. There's a small lake nearby that might have formed from the explosion, but it's hard to say. The evidence may be gone, but there's always more to discover. And it's a problem that NASA can't solve alone. Asteroid impacts are rare, which means that they're not very well funded. And most of the organizations that are involved in planetary defense are government-run, which means they tend to focus on defending against impacts during wartime. It's true that no crater has been found, but that's probably more of an argument for finding one than against. These form when rocks are pulverized by an impact, and then they collapse. And this one was probably caused by an impact over 300 feet in diameter. Scientists have been searching for the crater for decades, and that's led to some interesting discoveries. There's the heat generated when the rock hits the atmosphere. And then there's the explosion when it finally hits the ground. This heat wave would have reached temperatures of up to 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt rock and metal. Eyewitnesses reported that trees were ignited and set ablaze, and this fire consumed over 80 acres of forest. And that's just one problem with the impact hypothesis. Because if an asteroid had hit the ground, then shouldn't there be a crater? To put that in perspective, the 1980 eruption of Mount Street lands only flattened trees across an area of 230 square miles. But second, an eyewitness who was around 60 miles away at the time said that he saw a bright light in the sky, followed by a large fireball. Wow. Now that doesn't sound like your typical UFO, but we have another piece of evidence. When the rock or whatever caused this explosion hit the ground, it left behind an enormous crater. But before we jump to wild conspiracy theories, let's talk about the size of the explosion itself. It was really, really big. Now, the energy from an asteroid impact comes from two sources. Meanwhile, the explosion blast flattened over 80 million trees across an area of about 830 square miles. And while the asteroid impact hypothesis has some evidence to back it up, it also has a pretty big hole in it, that crater. Okay, just kidding. A fart is not a scientific hypothesis. But all these other ones are. Others argued that maybe it wasn't an asteroid at all, but a comet made of ice. Now, you might think that it's pretty irresponsible for scientists to speculate that a comet or an asteroid wiped out all those trees, but they have a point. In 2009, a research team identified a large depression in the ground, a so-called shatter cone. Even though we don't know what caused the Tunguska event, we do know that it happened. And speaking of asteroids, if one were to hit Earth today, would we be prepared? Probably not. So while scientists work on figuring out exactly what caused the Tunguska event, we should probably figure out how to defend ourselves against future ones. This is the first episode of our new series where we explore the weird ways that everyday objects would destroy us.